Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 5 of the R3 podcast. I hope you're all safe and well. Today's episode is a follow-up to a technical alert R3 issued in February this year, a time that seems like forever ago now. The alert provided an update on a number of proposed changes Nest, the Auto-Enrolment pension provider, was looking to implement for the benefit of Nest and the insolvency profession. I know there are some members of the profession that will stop the podcast now and move on to a Joe Rogan episode because of their historic dealings with Nest. Please bear with the episode as John and Robin are working to improve their relationship with the insolvency profession on behalf of Nest. I am joined today by John Howe, Head of Technical Account Management, and Robin Lewis, Head of Product Strategy at Nest Corporation. Like with all podcasts, it is important to stress that whilst care has been taken in the preparation of this podcast, it is intended for general guidance only and does not constitute legal advice. Let's begin. Casting our minds back to late 2019, a pleasant time for some and a time when COVID-19 was not at the forefront of people's minds. Sorry, I digress slightly there. So in late 2019, R3 held its annual Smaller Practice Group Forum, where John Howe kindly gave a presentation about Nest's proposed changes to those processes for the benefit of Nest and the insolvency profession. An update on some of the proposed changes was provided to members in a technical alert issued in February this year, which can be accessed via a link on this podcast page. This episode will provide an update on those matters Nest were continuing to implement or investigate, and a general update from Nest on what issues they are seeing in this new world of working from home. And in this regard, I would like to welcome John Howe and Robin Lewis to the R3 podcast. Welcome both. How are you?
Yeah, it's good, thank you.
Yeah, very well, thank you, Ben.
Very good, very good. So let's begin. One of the proposed changes was simplify the access process for IPs. So the activation email Nest send to IPs to give them access to the employer's Nest account currently is usable for 28 days and then it expires. Has this been increased to 90 days?
So this is something that we are still considering. Right now, this change has unfortunately not been implemented, but the plan is still to go ahead with it. We're currently working with our administrator to understand the available capacity in the upcoming releases in order to put this live. Understandably, through the first 9 months of the year following COVID, we've been prioritising system and operational changes to respond to the immediate impacts of the pandemic. This has been the focus to ensure that all of our processes remain operational for customers, and we've had to make a number of changes to adapt to situations for people throughout the country due to the crisis. As well as this, we've also needed to implement working from home capabilities for a number of sites within the UK and overseas. This has simply had to shift our focus on ensuring that the scheme is running successfully. Clearly, it's had a knock-on effect of other changes that were in the pipeline at the time. The change from the 28 to 90 days falls within this category, unfortunately. We know this is a change that would be welcomed by your members, those listening, and it is something we're looking to progress, albeit on a timeline that is longer than we would have liked.
That's understandable, especially with obviously lockdown and the pandemic and the situation we're all in. So coming to the exception schedule, I know any changes in isolation for an IP would create wider issues for Nest. Has there been any more thought on this process?
So yes, we understand that there are aspects of the process that we recognise that are less than ideal. So as a team, we're always open to making improvements that have positive customer outcomes at the centre of them. I know that this is something that John is supportive of, and other colleagues provide feedback to me and the team from our customer bases where we find opportunities to make these improvements. I understand that last time that John spoke with you and the rest of the community, you're very keen to hear issues that were experienced by IPs, so we consider how to address them. To date, following that, John has received a single email with a suggestion, so very keen to hear kind of a wider number of views from the IP community for finalising the changes that we're able to make to the system. Clearly can't do anything, but our aim is to make those changes that make the most difference. Yeah. So for the specific case that you've mentioned, it is true that were we to make any system changes in the way that we use exception schedules for IPs, it would have an impact on our wider customer base because of the way that we use that exception schedule for a multitude of processes. We've been in a number of kind of talks with our administrator about the change in the area, and we have concluded that at this point it would be very difficult to make the changes desired from the IP community. So right now, there's no plan in place is to go ahead. So just want to expand on that and some of the reasonings behind it. In part, it is a reason of scale. Any changes that are made to the Nest system, we need to ensure that there are no unforeseen adverse effects to the wider population. So currently, we're kind of supporting 9.4 million members working for 830,000 employers. Due to the scale, a scale that we knew we would always get to, we designed the scheme and the business model in a way where our aim was to have as many processes online and completers interacting with them. Insolvency process absolutely designed with this in mind. The circumstances that we find ourselves in at the moment that I've already mentioned, it will mean it's likely that we will see a rise in insolvency cases over the coming months. Many of those businesses will be using Nest for their workplace pension. So making changes to this process that will result in concentration of effort from a Nest back office perspective rather than completing exception schedules online by the users could actually see an increase in completion times if there is a backlog of manual work. So like the rest of the industry, we have needed to adapt in several areas in order to continue to provide all of our services to customers through the period. We don't feel like making this specific change is something that should be pursued right now. Just to that end, would like to thank everyone who is engaging with this process for continuing to do so in order to achieve the necessary outcome for all of our customers. This being said, we never want the insolvency practitioner to feel like they are in a position where they are stuck within a process and unable to progress with the insolvency. So should they find themselves in that scenario, we absolutely have exception processes in place that will aid the completion of specific process steps, including manual intervention, but that is as a last resort.
Thank you for that, Robin. I do understand where you're coming from, and it will be welcome. So thank you for expanding upon that. So the update we issued to members in February advised members that Nest was still investigating how they can help with changes post Nest system closure. So do you have any update on these closure matters?
So it is something that we are actively talking within the business at the moment and within the administrator. It's a priority for us, not just looking at this process from insolvency, but it is a priority that we are taking forward when we are looking at all of the other processes across the scheme in general. We're aware that this is a gap in the design and it causes issues for those in the community that are required to process insolvencies. So we are also engaging with organisations to understand what we can do to ensure that these changes we're going to put in place are addressing customer outcomes as well as easing operational burden for IPs. Again, we would have liked to have progressed this aspect further than we have done to this point following the update that you gave in February. But due to the operational challenges that we face this year, it's simply not happened. I appreciate this is a problem and I am trying to focus on these improvements, what we can do operationally rather than wholesale systems changes. System changes that would need to be put in place will likely to have significant lead times. And I would like to see improvements within this area much quicker than that. Insolvencies and the scenario that many businesses find themselves in won't wait for those lead times. And I don't want to find ourselves where we have a process that is untenable and is degraded because we're waiting for capacity in future releases. So I want any changes that we are to put in place to work for those who are engaging with it. And to that end is why we're speaking with companies that use this process regularly so we can understand problems firsthand and look to address them.
It's very pleasing to hear that you're speaking to companies. Our members of R3 will be pleased to hear that. Thank you, Robin. That was really, really helpful. So this may no longer be the case, but earlier this year I received an email from a member who advised, so the only way to use Nest when you have a trading scenario is not to tell them you are insolvent. If you do, you have no ability to set up new employees, especially in a terminal insolvency. On a particular case, it was large and complex. It was agreed not to put Nest on an insolvency market for this case, as it would have caused havoc. So, like I said, this may no longer be the case, but what are your views on this? I appreciate changes may have already been implemented, but what are your views?
Okay, thank you for that one, John. Now start talking. Yeah, I've heard this as well. And I think I've actually, from memory, a year or two ago, sat in an audience to one of my colleagues said this was a good thing to do. So I'm going to apologise for that now. If it truly is an insolvency, We're not now talking about somebody going on administration, but an insolvency. Nest needs to know, and you need to mark up Nest record to say it is an insolvent employer. However, because you can't add members to the Nest account once you've done that, it would be really good if before you mark them up as insolvent, you make sure all the new members are on and contributions where possible are up to date, where the employer or the old employer is going to pay them. Once you've marked it insolvent, as you know, you can't then add members. There are ways around that, and I'm happy to help insolvency practitioners to get around it if needs be. Something we're currently looking at, if we can do something about it. But please, if you've heard that piece of advice, inverted commas, ignore it. You should really be marking them up insolvent if they are insolvent.
Good to know. Thank you for clarifying. So, are there any live issues you both are experiencing at the moment with insolvency cases?
It's difficult to sort of answer that. Yes, of course, there's always things going on with insolvency cases. They're complex, they're messy. That's what you all work on, and we know it's difficult. So in terms of how our system works, no, it's working as it did previously, albeit with some of the things we want to change in it to make it work better. What we really want, and truly really want, is feedback. So I did ask for feedback a year ago, received, as Robin mentioned, one email with one idea on. It'd be good to get more. In fact, because we haven't, what I've done is I've gone to some of the larger insolvency practitioners who deal with multiple cases, many cases, and we've sought some feedback from them. We've had one back in the last few days, and I'm expecting another back shortly. That should give us something to start looking at as to make sure we're tackling the right areas. So just before we recorded this, Robin and I were on a meeting with our administrator, going through some of the things we have on our list, make sure we've got the things that we need to be looking at and to change.
You saying you only received one email from members? What we'll do, in our next circular to members, I will encourage those members to report any ideas or concerns to me so I can pass them on to you. So, do you have any updates for members? Anything else you wish to say?
So I think there's one sort of hot topic that I'm sure your members are all aware of. Well, I know they are because you've told them. So a few months ago, a month or two ago, there was a LinkedIn report that said that the RPS, the Redundancy Payment Service, would no longer be paying any more money to Nest because we were losing it in a bank account, or words to that effect. We were shocked to hear that, obviously. And one of the things that has happened as a result of that, and with the help of R3, we established a link with, I think, a really good person at the Redundancy Payment Service, something we hadn't been able to do up until then. And as a result of that, what we found is the RPS was sending money to one of our bank accounts that we weren't expecting. So Robin's given you a number earlier on. We've got $830,000, if I remember it correctly. We're getting money all over the place. It's coming in, and we have a process for dealing with it. So when money turns up in an account with no reference on it, we're stuck scratching our heads as to what we do with it. A process that takes a while. Having now found that that was a problem, we've helped RPS to make sure they send the money to the right account with the right references on it. We have a channel of communication with them that means it's two-way, so we can talk to them if things go wrong, and we can make sure it works better going forward. So, one, thank you, R3, for bringing this to our attention, because sure, we'd have found out eventually, but we got there quicker than we would otherwise do. And also with helping us find the right person to talk to get it fixed. It has been fixed, and it's now working fine.
You're more than welcome, and thank you for getting it fixed. Well, thank you both for speaking today. It's been really informative, and I think our members will be pleased to hear the updates have not been forgotten. They're in the pipeline. So thank you again. And with all guests on the R3 podcast, I ask this question. What is the one thing you have learned during your career so far that has stayed with you throughout?
It will be a surprise to you all know, because a lot of you see me on stage, that I am getting on a bit now. So I've been in pension 46 years, a lifetime. And I think throughout that, the key thing I've learned is the customer is king, the customer is right. And genuinely, I truly believe that is the case. And that's why I want your feedback. I will argue your case in Nest and do my very best to get changes through that work for you. Over to you, Robin.
Thank you, John. So I've been in pensions a number of years less, but still learned a few things. So I think for me, the key thing is to always challenge yourself and challenge the business that you're working in order to best achieve your goals. So personally, I think it's important that for all the challenges that face us within Nest, we're making sure we're approaching them appropriately and in the right way and with the customer at the centre. Whilst it's right to recognise issues and past challenges that may have hampered moving forward in certain areas, it's absolutely imperative to be open to new ideas, new insight that could provide an answer that might not have been previously open to you in order to achieve what your aims are. I think that if you don't do this, we'll never truly improve and grow as an individual or a business. The world we're in at the moment, changing faster than it ever has. People's needs changing, technology's changing. And at Nest, I think we need to be open and understand and listen to all of those things in order to continue to improve and progress from this point.
Great. Well, thank you very much, John and Robin. Very much enjoyed talking to you both, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to episode 5 of the R3 podcast. We hope you found the discussion informative and useful. I wish to thank John and Robin again, and thank everyone who has taken the time to listen. The next episode of the R3 podcast will be with Rachel Grant at Manolay Partners, where we will be discussing litigation funding. Should any members wish to be a guest on the R3 podcast, please contact me. My contact details are on the R3 website, or simply message me on LinkedIn. Stay safe.